From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture.
Compared to the last couple of springs, this spring has been unusual in the Pacific Northwest region in that it has been characterized by cool and wet weather. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions, as have my colleagues in the Master Gardening Program, about blue orchard bees or mason bees, Osmia lignaria, which many homeowners have in their backyards to pollinate their fruit trees, also just to watch them because they're a delightful bee to have. Asking how the bees are doing and whether there are any strategies to help the bees along, because this spring there have been very few good foraging days available for these bees. Even though they tend to forage in cool weather, it's their natural, that's the kind of typical weather that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. People are kind of curious. Do they do things right, and how are they doing? And so I reached out to the person I always go to when I have questions about blue orchard bees. That's Jerry Paul. He's on the board of the Benton Soil and Water Conservation District. He's a master melitologist. You might recall Jerry from a previous episode where he talked about the Bee Buddies program, which he'll talk a little bit more about and give us an update on in this episode, an initiative with Benton Soil Water and Conservation District. And he's also, him and his wife, head up the Jerry and Judith Paul Pollinator Health Fund, which you can make a donation to. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, which supports an endowment for the bee taxonomist position here at Oregon State University. So Jerry is really knowledgeable, and he walked in my office with some graphs of temperature and weather and some real strategies that he uses to ensure that he always gets good mason bee returns regardless of the weather. So without further ado, let's go talk with Jerry this week on pollination. Okay, well, we are reprisal with Jerry Paul from Benton Soil Water Conservation District and the Master Melitologist. Welcome back to Pollination.
Well, glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
People might remember we had an episode earlier with you where you talked about the Bee Buddies program, and which is this great mason bee program that the Conservation District does here in Benton County. And what I wanted to talk to you today, and I see you're wearing a mason bee t-shirt, is everybody wants to know what's going on with mason bees these days. But just to begin with, to remind people of that episode, what's the Bee Buddies program?
The Bee Buddy program was a program that we established to help the local population gardeners, home gardeners, who were doing mason bees, but they weren't doing it correctly. They would buy a box, buy some cocoons, leave it out there, and 2 years later the box would be completely destroyed by parasites and that. So developed the program to help them, where we provided them the box, the cocoons on the release date that was here in Corvallis around end of March, 1st of April. And then they would enjoy the fruits of that bee box and the mason bees and some educational material that went along with it. And then on June 1st, when generally the parasites of the wasp hatch out here, we would go and collect the box, store the tubes properly through the winter months, and then in October, occasionally, we first started by putting on training classes of how to open the nesting tubes and cleaning the cocoons properly. And we partnered with the Lynn County Master Gardeners, and then again put them in the refrigerator until March, and then started the program over. And we did that for about 3 years. And then the program got to be a little bit more work and not the volunteers that needed to. So what we did is we offered all of our Bee Buddies to purchase that box, and along with 2 classes, one in March or the April, I guess June timeframe now, of how to properly take your box down and store it. And then again in September, October timeframe, we'll put on the last class on how to clean those cocoons. So hopefully those 30 or 40 bee buddies will now be doing it properly and moving on so that we were doing all the work, and the education part of that program kind of ceased, and that really hurt me a lot. So we're back into another way of doing education now. So.
Well, I imagine this is a program matures, and it kind of like you started, you instigate it. You've got all these bee buddies now, right across the county, and now they're doing responsible mason bee management. So what more can you ask for?
Well, that's true, and but not only that, it was really interesting because we were able to get some bee buddies through another one of our directors, who started a small group in the Monroe area where they're small farmers. And so we're doing that to try to educate the smaller farmers, and I've also been involved with another group of individuals that are actually doing mason bees on meadow foam, and so it's a whole new experience for me as well, another learning experience.
Well, I'm glad you talked about learning experiences, because this year in Western Oregon, it has been unusually wet and cool. The time of the year when mason bees in the wild would emerge and, make a lot of cocoons. It seems like a year that would have been tough. So why I have you here today is just to give us we're towards the end of the season, or maybe not, maybe some people are just getting started, but just to look back. So how unusual a year was this?
It was quite unusual, although what I'm about to say anywhere is nothing scientific to be taken scientifically. It's an observation of what I've looked at, because 2 years ago, we did not get a very good crop of mason bees at all, and that was not this weather condition that we have. The following year, it was a great mason bee season, and that's when we had that big heat wave toward the end of the season, which I was afraid all of the mason bee cocoons were in paper bags and cardboard boxes in a garage, like you're supposed to do for the summer, and we had that extremely hot weather, and I was afraid that the cocoons might have been destroyed because of that heat wave. Getting a little off track, but when I started to place those cocoons back out, the only thing that heat wave killed was all the pollen mites. We're doing that large mason bee survey, health survey here at OSU, and Sarah Kincaid is leading that up, and she had a hard time finding samples with live pollen mites. Yes, she asked me to look through my collection, and we couldn't find them either. So now I've got a bunch of nice clean cocoons that I didn't know whether we're going to make it, and now we hit this March area where it's going to rain and be cold, and so put out the boxes anyway at the end of March. Did not put out the cocoons at that time. Then waited a couple of weeks and put out half of the cocoons, and luckily I think one of the things that I have noticed is that the generally 6,000 square foot lot of a homeowner that's raising mason bees really doesn't have the flora that's necessary to support their bees during these hard times. It takes an abundance of plant material of different times when they flower. So as my experience, and also when you put out a mason bee box, you put it facing east-west. And because of this, I actually put it, southwest. I put it a little more west than normal to capture the sun this coming year. I didn't know that it was going to be as long, so every time the sun was out, no matter what time of the day, because here in Oregon, it seems to rain all day, and the sun tends to come out later in the afternoon. So I had the boxes that I put out closer to areas where it might capture that afternoon sun. So a couple of statistics from the end of March until today. We only had, that's 68 days. We only had 46 days that were above 55 degrees, and that's what the mason bee likes in order to...
so out of a total of 60 days, we had about 40.
46, yes.
So there's about 20 days there that it was too cold for a mason bee to forage.
Yes.
Okay.
And even during those times, during the 55-degree temperature, we had 41 days of rain. And so the mason bees were actually flying in a mist, which they also do. That's why they're a great pollinator. So they come out early at 55 degrees, and they can also move around in the rain, where our other pollinator, the honeybee and stuff, tends to stay inside.
We had a lot of rain.
Yeah, we had a lot of rain. We had 15 inches in that 68 days.
Okay.
So that's a lot of rain, and every time I would go out to see what the bees were doing, saw a lot of little heads sticking out of the nesting tubes waiting for the weather to warm up. But as soon as it got above 55 degrees, they would start to fly.
So how many good days since March have we had? Like good foraging days?
I think it was only 46.
Oh, but there was some of those 46 days were raining.
Yeah, just a little bit of mist, but you know, it was still like...
There were some days it was not misting there, Jerry.
Yes, you're correct. Well, in that period, we had, on March 12th, we had 3 inches of rain. And then again in May, we had another inch of rain. So yes, it did rain quite a bit.
Okay, all right.
But my point being, too, is that as these bees came out, I had at least 10 different varieties of plant materials.
Oh.
Because mason bees only need good weather, a place to nest, and a mud source. We had plenty of more mud, but again, addressing a mud source, the mason bee does not go along the ground. Everybody says, oh, Oregon's got a lot of mud.
Yeah.
They go up and down a vertical surface, testing the mud to get the mud at the exact consistency that they want it. So a mud hole was really close to where they are is another help. And the flowering source next to what they need is a good source.
Okay, so let me just pick up on those two things. So the first thing that you've mentioned a couple times is that people get mason bees, and I imagine this is the picture. They've got a backyard with lawn, and they've got one cherry tree or one, and that's all they've got. That's probably the typical, and that's not what you have.
That's correct.
Tell us what's a better setup to kind of get, especially when you have, knowing spring is going to be a time when an entire, week might go by and the bloom might be lost. What's the better strategy for, gardening for mason bees?
Like all of the pollinators, I think with mason bees, we need to have a long season of blooms available with our plant materials. And so in my case, I started with the ribes, sanguinian, and it was in full bloom in the rain in March. And so the observation is, from my standpoint, in my 5 acres, that the plant materials are still on track, as no matter what the weather was in the last few years, because the ribes came out, the Oregon grape was all in bloom, and then as soon as that went away, I'm looking out. It's still cold and rainy, but now the maple tree, the big leaf maples are starting to bloom, and so there's a constant source of any time the bee needs to fly, there's something for them to pollinate and get their stuff. And then after the maples went away, the bitter cherry, the Prunus marginata, started to bloom. Then I had a couple of apple trees, and my neighbor has a small orchard. Then the crab apples came out. And then after all of those start to go away, then the oaks start to bloom. And so there's a constant source of materials for the bees to feed on. In the backyard situation that you're talking about, yes, they have the cherry tree. Most people all want to do their plum tree, and that's the early bloomer. And maybe they'll have an Oregon grape. But just remember, too, the mason bee will fly at least the distance of a football field. And so hopefully the neighborhood, and here in Corvallis, we're wondering, too, one of our friends, the street trees that we have planted are in bloom. So they probably can take advantage of some of that. But
Well, I do, but just to come that early bloom, I think that's a mistake that I often see, is that people are waiting for the fruit tree to come in, but they really, when you put the blocks out, there should be something in bloom already. And I know, ryebees are great, and if you don't mind going exotics, I always find that rosemary got lots of bloom by the time you put as early as you can possibly put your cocoons out. There's going to be something there.
absolutely. And I don't think it stops, because now, the oaks are all done. I'm looking around my property. The bees are still really very active. So you need to extend that season of your plants, and you're absolutely right. A lot of the herbs are out. So you need to look at a long season of blooms for probably, I'm not going to have our people take the boxes down now and probably till the end of June because of the activity. The mason bees felt like they were still in the refrigerator because another colleague of mine who does meadow foam, he just put out his mason bees for the meadow foam crop 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, right, down here at Corvallis is just coming into full bloom.
It is,
Yeah.
yes. And it's behind as well. They think that the meadow foam is a little bit behind bloom this year because of the weather. And it also depends on, if you look at the fields, the elevation of the rolling hills and the meadow foam. It just takes a little bit of temperature difference, as I've observed, where we have the mason bees out is not as full bloom as where it is at a little bit higher elevation.
And just for our listeners who are not from Western Oregon, meadow foam is a unique oilseed crop that we only grow here. It's a low growing, it's adapted from a native plant.
Yes.
And it's Lamanthus, right?
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
something like that. Anyways, it's a low growing plant, and it's people will produce mason bees on it. Like, it just has abundant nectar and pollen. It's big white fields. It's a gorgeous plant, but it is coming towards the end of what people traditionally think of in terms of mason bee, putting mason bees out. Oftentimes I did the same thing. I put my mason bees out at the beginning of April, and it was cold. Not in previous years, we've had some great weather, but here we had some cold weather. And one strategy I've heard people talk about is not putting all your cocoons out in one go, just to hedge your bets against weather. Is that a good idea?
Very good idea. And that's what we did that this year. That's the first year. In the Bee Buddy program, I was not able to do that because I went to everybody's yard and installed the box, and I didn't want to. But this year I was able to do it and instructed the Bee Buddies to do that as well. When I delivered the box, put out half your cocoons, wait 2 weeks, and put out another half. Another interesting thing about the mason bee and the products that they tried mason bees and almonds, and that has some success and no success because like an almond, once the flower is pollinated, it doesn't put out any, it starts building the seed. Same with meadow foam. A flower in meadow foam, once it is pollinated, it stops providing the food source for the bees. So that's why a lot of the flower will just start to close up right away. So that's another issue. When that monoculture disappears,
those bees are
the
done.
bees are still looking for things. So we're lucky here in Oregon. We have plenty of blackberries, and they tend to finish their cycle on the blackberries in those areas where people are using it in these monoculture type things.
We were having a conversation previous to this, and there seems to be a hard limit, because I'm sure other people are saying, well, a year like this, I should just wait indefinitely. Put them out in midsummer. There are limits to when you can put your bees out, both in terms of the bees' capacity to live that long, but also in terms of parasites. Can you talk about sort of these limits of how late can you put bees out, and what's the case this year?
I think that's a good question, because a bee is like a bear. It's in hibernation in the refrigerator when it's cold, or out in the outdoors, until the temperature reaches 55 degrees. And I don't know how long you can keep them in cold storage before they use up all of their stored fats.
Yeah.
Before they, so the males all hatch first,
Mm-hmm.
and they were out really almost on time
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, and they were looking around, but the females tended to stay behind in their hatching out, and I don't know whether that's a case where we can extend it very much further,
Mm-hmm.
but I know maybe it's better to talk or need to talk to some of the other people who are putting them out later that are doing mason bees professionally to see how late they've done. But this is the first time I've seen anybody put them out as late as April. And it does not seem to affect. I visited the site the other day, and there is so much activity. It's almost like a honeybee hive. You can hear the bees humming. In our backyard, you hardly ever hear a mason bee hum. Because you only have 5 or 6 coming
going
in
at a time.
Yeah, you don't have 200 or 300.
Well, you talked to a lot of people who are producing bees, and you were talking also just kind of getting, you're going to be, there's an event coming up this week, and you're going to have people kind of report back to you how things are going. What are you hearing from people in terms of their returns this year? Jen Larson, who runs our Master Beekeeping and Master Melitologist program, has already told me, it's way down from last year, and we have our boxes down by the greenhouses there, and we got a fraction of last year's returns. What are you hearing?
I haven't heard anything yet. I hope that I've asked them all to come to the event and bring me a picture of their bee box and their mud source, and I could answer that question later. As far as my boxes go, I don't see any difference. I've had really a good season. There's 6 of them that I put out, 3 neighbors and my own, and they all seem to be doing just about what they did last year. I think we're going to leave them out longer, as I said, because I've also talked to another entomologist that specializes more in beetles and bugs and that kind of stuff, and I asked her, should I be concerned about the wasps that are going to hatch June 1st? And she said, no, it looks like everything is going to be later as far as the parasites go, too, because she was out collecting bugs for an event and couldn't find hardly anything to share with the group. So this is a strange year, and I don't know whether that's going to continue next year, but it looks like we can push them a little bit further, but time will tell.
What do you? I'm curious. We talked a little bit about mud. It's not just mud on the surface. They really are looking for consistency, in a pit with a gradient of moisture, is ideal for them, that they can find the clay at the right level. But can you tell us a little bit about these pits? And also, you're going to have people at this event bring you the mud. What are you going to do with that mud?
No, I'm not going to have them bring the mud. I may have said I want them to bring me a picture of their mud source, because when I go and pick up the box, everybody's, I tell them just to take and dig a hole that's about 12 by 12, 12 inches deep, and keep it wet at the bottom all the time that their box is out there. It's yes, 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 and then when I go and pick it up, I see no mud source at all. A mason bee flies to a flower and picks up pollen, makes a little pollen ball, and how many trips do you think that takes her to make a pollen ball that's the size of a small pea? Then she has to go to a mud source and get mouthfuls of mud to make the cap and cap that off. That's another. So the closer the flowering source is and the closer the mud is, the faster she will be able to complete that process. So the mud source should be within 20 feet of where she is. So it's a quick trip. So you go back to these people, and so this year I want to see that they bring me a picture of their mud source, and I don't want them to bring the box, because as part of the process of taking the box down, you take the nesting tubes out, holding them vertical, and you turn them upright so that the opening of the tubes are facing up, so that if you juggle the tubes at all and there's still an egg there, it doesn't fall off the pollen source.
Okay.
It stays on the pollen source, and so that's really important. A lot of people might do that, take it out of there, jiggle them, and putting them in the paper bag to put them in a warm area to go through their cycle. If they jiggle that egg off of the pollen source, it's going to die. So
Okay, so you take a look at, and I was recently at Willamette Valley Vineyards. Stephen Paisley has a nice, manages a mason bee domicile right at the vineyard as you pull into the parking lot. Had this really nice pit with a covering that the bees could get in, keeps it. It was a really beautiful design. But he did take it, just like you said, took his mud seriously, made sure it was very close to the domicile, and I could just see those bees were doing great there up on just off the I-5.
Yeah, I think the bees will just leave if they can't find the mud source in a really dry area. So.
Well, the last thing I did want to cover is you had success this year. It was a challenging year. So many of us didn't do so well. You do have this series of plants, and you've talked a little bit about them, but I was a beneficiary of the Benton Soil and Water Conservation District's plant sale. Tell us a little bit about where we can get some great native plants. When do you have to? And I ordered early. I didn't get my Grandilia, sadly, but got all the rest of the plants. When do people need to get their orders in for getting native plants if you're in Benton County or from other soil and water conservation districts?
It'll probably be opening up within the next few months. We have a wide variety of plants. We established a committee this year to help us tell us what kind of plants that they want. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to modify some of that for a longer session. I also want to mention that the Oregon Bee Atlas has a great design of some hedgerow stuff. You need to look at the hedgerow material and plan your garden. It doesn't have to be very big. A lot of people start too large. Start with a 10 by 10 plot and take care of it, and then build that. So this year the plant pickup will be out at the fairgrounds and the new building that they have out there. But keep checking the website. I'm not sure, because of last year's, it was really hard on the staff. We lost a couple of
the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah, pandemic, and staff member was able to move on to a better position, and so it was kind of tough. This year we're hiring some help to do that. It went really well, and I hope all of the plants do that. But we have also, bare root seeds, potted plants, and in quite a variety. But I think that we're going to target more the full range of plants this year, and not so much the trees.
Well, for those of you who are not in Benton County, your Soil and Water Conservation District is likely to have a plant sale. Yes. It is the most affordable place to find strange and weird native plants. It really can't be beat. Make sure to look them up. And thank you so much, Jerry, for giving us some tips on dealing with the challenges of weather and our mason bees.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn, Sin, and Neil, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.